That is one big pile of shit. This could be it. We may be in some multiverse where I don't even exist.
Don't knock rationalization. Where would we be without it?
Yes, without the use. To take them out, take them down, do your stuff. Life finds a way.
Hello and welcome to episode 8 of The Complete Works, a deep dive into the career and films of actor Jeff Goldblum. My name is Mike Smith. Joining me on this journey into the wondrous world of Goldblum is my friend, co-host, and fellow Goldblum maniac,
Mike DeCriscio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing just swell. Mike, how are you?
I'm great. You know, it's week 4 or whatever of quarantine. It's been about a month since my theaters kind of closed down around me. And it's getting a little stir crazy in here. Getting some cabin fever. I would imagine it's worse for you since you've actually been working from home.
Yes, yeah. What is time other than a human construct, Mike, is what I'm getting at. It's been many days, many moons have passed since I last saw the sun. So it's great.
I'm looking at your wall right now, and it just has notches with you counting down the days, as if you've been in a prison for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. It just says the end is very, very fucking nigh, or whatever it is. Yes. 28 days later.
All right, but we're not here to talk about quarantine, Mike. We're here to talk about Jeff Goldblum, and we're going to try to do that as much as possible in this episode, given the circumstances. So when young actors start out, they typically end up doing a lot of lousy stuff, right? You know, Jennifer Aniston made her film debut in Mac and Me, and then followed up with Leprechaun before she was casting Friends. Amy Adams got her first major role in a direct-to-video sequel to Cruel Intentions, where she replaced Sarah Michelle Gellar in the lead role.
Wow.
Yeah. Jeremy Renner first came to the world with National Lampoon's Senior Trip, a college comedy with the tagline, 4 and 7 beers ago.
Hold on.
I had a lot of fun looking at these early roles, Mike, in case you couldn't tell. I mention all this because so far, the early career of Jeff Goldblum has been decidedly not very embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know, his roles are typically small, but in a short 3-year career, he had already worked with some named directors like Robert Altman, Paul Mazursky, and Michael Winner, and would typically steal whatever scenes he was in, even if the role was small. And not many 25-year-old actors can say they've appeared in not one, but 2 Best Picture nominees at the Oscars, both of which generally considered today among the best American films ever made. Of course, the first one was Nashville, released in 1975, and then, in 1977, Jeff Goldblum popped up for one scene in Woody Allen's Annie Hall.
A relationship, I think, is like a shark. You know, it has to constantly move forward or it dies. And I think what we got on our hands is a dead shark.
Woody Allen.
I love what you're wearing.
Oh, you do? Yeah? Oh, well, this tie is a present from Grammy Hall.
Who? Grammy Hall?
Yeah, my Grammy.
What are you kidding? What'd you do, grow up in a Norman Rockwell painting?
Diane Keaton.
You don't want me to live with you.
How, I don't want you to live with me. Whose idea was it?
Mine.
Yeah. It was yours, actually, but I approved it immediately.
Tony Roberts.
The one with the VPL.
VPL?
The visible panty line.
Yeah, she's a 10 max, and that's great for you, because you're used to 2s, aren't you?
Carol Kane.
What's your name?
Allison.
You're like New York Jewish left-wing liberal intellectual, Central Park West, Brandeis University with the socialist summer camps, and the father with the Ben Shahn drawings, right? And the really, strike-oriented kind of... stop me before I make a complete imbecile of myself.
No, that was wonderful. I love being reduced to a cultural stereotype.
Paul Simon.
We're going to meet Jack and Angelica and have a drink there, and if you'd like to come, we'd love to have you. We can just sit and talk, nothing. Not a big deal. It's just relax, just be very mellow.
I don't respond well to mellow. You know what I mean? I have a tendency to. If I get too mellow, I ripen and then rot.
Shelley Duvall.
I was at the Stones concert in Altamont when they killed that guy, remember?
Yeah, were you? I was at an Alice Cooper thing where 6 people were rushed to the hospital with bad vibes.
Janet Margolin. Colleen Dewhurst. Christopher Walken in the new Woody Allen film.
Were you always funny?
Hey, what is this, an interview? We're supposed to be making love.
Annie Hall.
No, that was the most fun I've ever had without laughing.
Annie Hall.
So Annie Hall winner of Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Actress for Diane Keaton at the Oscars in 1977, a year where it was sort of the underdog, actually, Mike. This movie was not supposed to win Best Picture. Do you know what was?
I do not, no.
Well, a lot of people really expected a little movie. Maybe you heard of it. It was called Star Wars. To really clean up that year. That was the year Star Wars was released. It was kind of supposed to win Best Picture and all that stuff. The Academy opted for a less of a blockbuster approach and more of a movie that I think more reflected the kind of new Hollywood period at the time, you know, being like the Scorsese's and stuff, the more personal dramas and things like that. Star Wars was the big blockbuster, and it kind of invented blockbusters, except, I mean, Jaws came first, but then Star Wars really...
Wait a second.
Jaws came first, but then Star Wars really took the ball and ran with it, as far as blockbusters are concerned, to the point where it's, you know, now the model for every major blockbuster film that's been released in the 40 years since. So as far as consolation prizes go, that one's not bad. But obviously Star Wars did not win Best Picture. Annie Hall did, and Annie Hall has been preserved by the U.S. Library of Congress. The American Film Institute ranked it number 35 on their list of the best American movies, number 11 on their list of the best romances, and number 4 on their list of the best comedies. The Writers Guild of America named this the funniest screenplay of all time back in 2015.
Wow, bold move, but okay.
Yeah, especially around 2015. That's odd. Annie Hall also considered the definitive Woody Allen movie, and it marked a major turning point in his career. He was a comedian known for much broader comedies, but having been influenced by Federico Fellini's 8½, he began to work on something more personal, something that feels autobiographical, although he has always claimed that it is not, even though it obviously is. It is the movie that really exemplified the Woody Allen persona, the kind of neurotic, intellectual, quick-talking Jew that was hugely influential to a generation of filmmakers. Now, I don't think we can talk about Woody Allen without talking about, you know, Woody Allen.
Right.
The details of Woody Allen's personal life are sketchy at best, I think is a generous way to put it. Back in 1992, his ex-wife Mia Farrow accused Allen of sexual molesting their adopted daughter Dylan. That allegation resurfaced around 2014 when Mia Farrow and her son Ronan Farrow were tweeting about it. And kind of on a related note, Ronan Farrow is a reporter known for writing the articles that exposed Harvey Weinstein and his sexual abuse.
Right.
Kind of crazy connection there. But the fact that Allen had a tendency to date girls much younger than him in the first place, including Soon-Yi Previn, his wife of like 25 years, but you know, also his sort of adopted stepdaughter, doesn't exactly help matters in that regard. So watching Woody Allen movies can be a tough ask for a lot of people. And if you do watch them, it often makes them play differently than they would have when they were initially released. Like I watched Manhattan for the first time about 2 years ago, Mike, which was his follow-up to Annie Hall. Don't know if you've ever seen Manhattan.
No.
Generally considered one of his classics. A large part of that movie, and again, this was released in 1979, a large part of that movie is Woody Allen in his 40s being in a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. And
oh no,
it is very uncomfortable to watch, and there's some filmmaking craft to admire, but I really did not enjoy the experience of watching it. I don't know. I mean, as far as Woody Allen goes, like I think everybody has their own personal line to draw for, you know, problematic artists. Have you seen other Woody Allen movies up to this point, Mike? Have you seen Annie Hall before? I guess is also my question.
No, I hadn't seen Annie Hall, and it was kind of just always one of those, like, you know, pillars of like that mid-70s like American classics stuff that I just never got around to. I was a huge fan of Midnight in Paris, which is, you know, one of his later 2014 or 13 or whatever.
That was 2011, I think. Yeah,
2011. Okay, yeah, I remember being in college when it came out, so I couldn't remember when it was. And that
it all blurs together.
It all blurs together. Yeah, and that it like is just that, you know, English grad student obsessed with 20s Paris literature world,
right.
You know, Hemingway and all that, and I was just like, this is my movie. And then you kind of stop and think about it, or you know, sort of realize, like you said, when in 2014, when all that stuff came back again, was like, oh wait, maybe this is bad. Maybe Woody Allen's bad actually. So I haven't seen a whole lot of his back catalog, you know, or his filmography, but I know he has a million movies. And I don't know how interested I am in, like, you know, deep diving into his oeuvre so much anymore. But I mean, Annie Hall was pretty pleasant, I feel, as far as it could have been. Like, I haven't seen Manhattan, which is another one of those same things. But I'm really glad that this wasn't about a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. I'm glad that's not what this is about.
For sure. I do think Annie Hall, by comparison, mostly holds up. I think there is some stuff that feels weird now.
Oh, yeah.
But for the most part, it's about a neurotic guy in an adult relationship. So I would say if you were going to watch a Woody Allen movie, I think this would be a good one to watch. I would more heavily recommend Sleeper, which is a very silly movie, my personal favorite of his. And again, I haven't seen a ton of his stuff either. I've seen bits of the back catalog here and there. But Sleeper was from before Annie Hall, and it's just a weird madcap farce comedy where Woody Allen plays a guy who wakes up 300 years in the future and has to try to figure out how to be a person or whatever. It's pretty funny. It's a good movie. Right. I do think, again, like I said before, everyone has their own line they have to draw when it comes to art made from people. For example, we're both big fans of Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski. You kind of compartmentalize. I think for me, when the artist appears on that screen as some version of himself, like Woody Allen does, or like Bill Cosby or Louis C.K. does, it's harder to enjoy their work, I would say. But for the purposes of this podcast, we're traveling back to the 70s, before all this stuff was out there in the open, and trying to put ourselves in the context of the times while still looking at it with a modern lens. So young Jeff Goldblum got to pop up in Annie Hall for one scene. He's on screen for maybe 5 seconds, but he gets a very memorable line that we'll cover in a few minutes. Actually, this line, a while back, the Roxy Theater, which is the indie theater near my house in Missoula, Montana, they used to do a pre-show video that was a montage of different movie quotes, basically. And there was all the classics, it was you talking to me, and here's looking at you, kid, and all that stuff. But then about halfway through the video, it would just pause on Jeff Goldblum and Annie Hall saying, moving on to the next one. And so I saw that clip over and over again because I went to the Roxy a lot for about 6 months, and then they stopped showing the video. But so Jeff Goldblum saying "I forgot my mantra" is ingrained in my mind, and we will talk about that at length, possibly later on,
as best we can.
As best we can, talk about a 5-second scene. We're gonna give it a shot. Outside of the star of the film, Jeff Goldblum, Annie Hall stars Woody Allen in the lead role as Alvy Singer, a neurotic comedian in a relationship with the titular Annie Hall, played by Diane Keaton, who won Best Actress for this movie and starred in 8 Woody Allen movies over the course of about 20 years. She also dated Woody Allen for a brief period a few years earlier, which is, again, why Annie Hall generally seems like it's an autobiographical movie, even though Woody Allen claims that it isn't. It's one of those things where it's I'm sure it's exaggerated at points, it's one of those things, I'm sure there's elements, but he's a neurotic comedian dating the person who you actually dated in real life, and it's weird. But beyond that, Tony Roberts, who played Woody Allen's best friend in several of his movies, plays his best friend Rob in this one. He's also the deputy mayor in The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which I watched recently. It's the best movie ever made. Throwing it out there. The great Carol Kane, known for the TV series Taxi and more recently Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. She plays Allison, Alvy's first wife. Paul Simon shows up for a bit as Tony Lacey, a musician who takes an interest in Annie, which also means that Paul Simon was in the movie that beat the movie Carrie Fisher was in for Best Picture. Just throwing it out there.
Whoa.
Paul Simon and Carrie Fisher. Yeah, Paul Simon and Carrie Fisher were in a relationship in real life. In case that needs to be, drawn out for some people. But yeah. Janet Margolin from Ghostbusters 2 appears as Robin, Alvy's second wife. And we've got a Nashville reunion here as Shelley Duvall shows up for a bit as Pam, a Rolling Stone reporter Alvy goes on a date with. And then once again, our boy Christopher Walken shows up as Dwayne Hall, which makes him the first three-peat Goldblum reunion.
3 in a row. Wild.
Yeah,
no, not in a row.
Not quite almost. In a row, but he 2 movies back to back for sure. After Next Stop Greenwich Village and The Sentinel, and then again Annie Hall. Although he and Goldblum have not shared a scene together in any of these movies, by the way.
I didn't even realize that.
They're in 3 movies together, but they're not together. I mean, in order for them to have shared a scene, Goldblum would have to actually be in the movie.
Right. They're in the movie together the way The Rock and Vin Diesel were in Furious 9 or whatever, Fast 9. What was that movie?
The 8th one, The Fate of the Furious.
8th one.
Yes, I know what you're saying. And then from there's a ton of cameos and young actors who would be big later on in this movie. Media critic Marshall McLuhan, who I learned about, in my intro to communications class back in sophomore year of college, who said the medium is the message and that kind of thing. He pops up as himself for a pretty famous bit. Truman Capote walks on screen for a little bit as it's in kind of in the distance, but Alfie kind of points out he's the winner of the Truman Capote lookalike contest, and it's actually Truman Capote walking past the screen. John Glover, who played Lex Luthor's father on Smallville, plays Jerry, an old actor ex-boyfriend of Annie's. Beverly D'Angelo, who also appeared in The Sentinel, shows up very briefly and just on a TV screen in the distance as an actress on Rob's TV show in L.A. And finally, making her film debut so far away that you can basically not even tell it's her. Sigourney Weaver
Yep.
appears as the woman Alvy's on a date with at the end when he sees Annie again. This is 2 years before Alien came out, for context there. So Sigourney Weaver, like, again, just like you can barely, like, I missed her when I watched it. I knew she was in the movie. I knew she played that part, but I like forgot about it. And like, it like came and went, and I was expecting, oh, there must be some kind of close up of Sigourney Weaver at some point. There's not.
Nope.
But if you know it's her, then you know it's her. Annie Hall was written by Woody Allen and Marshall Brickman, who co-wrote several Woody Allen movies, and directed by Woody Allen 2 years after his previous film, Love and Death, and 2 years before his next film, Manhattan. His most recent film was 2019's A Rainy Day in New York, which has still not received a release in the US because Amazon, which was supposed to release the film, dropped out following public backlash over his sexual assault allegation. And several actors who were in the movie, including Timothy Chalamet and Selena Gomez, they actually donated their salaries to organizations like RAINN and Time's Up. So I think the movie has been released in like France and a couple of other like European countries and stuff like that. But as far as I know, there's no U.S. distribution, which like he literally released the movie like a year before that too. So it's one of those things. It's just like, it's weird how this kind of stuff kind of comes in waves, I guess. I always liked at the Independent Spirit Awards a couple of years ago, John Mulaney and Nick Kroll hosted, and they did a really like solid bit about all the men who have been taken down from Me Too and Time's Up. And I liked Mulaney had a great Woody Allen joke, which was,
now people keep asking, can you separate the art from the man?
Like with Kevin Spacey, can we still love K-Pax?
And what about Woody Allen and his last 20 unwatchable movies? Can I still not watch them? Or must I reevaluate based on these new allegations that were a matter of public record 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. But Annie Hall was released on April 20th, 1977, and made about $38 million on a budget of $4 million. If you were not seeing Annie Hall that weekend, you could have been seeing Three Women, a movie written and directed by this podcast's old friend, Robert Altman.
Oh, yeah.
There it is. Starring Shelley Duvall, Sissy Spacek, and Janice Rule. They played the Three Women. And the IMDb plot synopsis for Annie Hall reads, neurotic New York comedian Alvy Singer falls in love with the ditzy Annie Hall. So, Mike, that's a pretty long preamble to this subject, but what are your overall thoughts on the movie? I mean, you kind of mentioned, like, you had a pleasant enough time, I guess, watching this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I was very nervous going into it a little bit. I wasn't really sure if anything... I watched it with my parents, and even my mom was saying, like, oh, man, I don't know if this is going to hold up. Like, I don't know how good this is going to go. And I had that feeling, too. Not that it would hold up for me because I hadn't seen it yet, but I was afraid it was going to be just a lot of, like, gross Woody Allen stuff. And, like, it's definitely in there. There definitely are moments where I was like, I don't feel good about whatever this is. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those. But overall, for the most part, this was just a pretty funny, goofy, at times pathological and dark comedy, which
sure,
that's a lot of my favorite things. So it's unfortunate that Woody Allen sucks. But this movie is pretty good. I had a pretty good time. I had a lot of laughs, all that stuff. And it's got a lot of my favorite. I didn't know that this movie had so much like, meta devices and stuff, fourth wall breaks and all these things where we're just kind of talking to the camera and watching the scene and commenting on the scene and all that stuff, because that goes on pretty much throughout. And even the movie opens with this kind of like, just close up of Woody Allen doing like a comedy monologue for a little bit, setting up the movie. And I didn't know what to expect going in, and I didn't know that was in there. So that was a lot of fun. Like, I mean, it's got a lot of that stuff. While also, I feel like maybe this is the safe Woody Allen movie, like you mentioned kind of before. This might be the one that you can get away with, have seen it. All right, that's it. We're done. We don't need to see any of his 80 other movies.
Yeah, basically, it's Annie Hall. Like, you've probably heard that it's good, and yes, I would say that it's good. It's, I don't love it. I had seen the movie once before. I've seen Annie Hall once, like 4 years ago, and then I rewatched it again. It's on the Criterion Channel right now, by the way, if anybody wants to stream it there. It's also available on Amazon Prime, I think. So there's a couple of different places you can stream it. But yeah, I don't love the movie, but I do enjoy it. I think it's pretty good. I do honestly prefer the more slapstick tone of Sleeper, which is, it's a real, like, I haven't watched Sleeper in about 8 years, probably. So I'm like hanging on to my memory of that movie from then. But I liked it a lot back then. So there is that. But for better or worse, I think this is definitively what a Woody Allen movie is. Like, this is the template that became the persona of Woody Allen. Every movie following Annie Hall was like, in the vein of Annie Hall. And if you start with this one without having seen any Woody Allen movies and you don't like it, I would not recommend you watch further Woody Allen stuff because that stuff is not for you, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, there's actually don't mean to keep bringing in outside jokes, but there was a great Simpsons joke where somebody mentions Woody Allen at one point, and Flanders says, "You know, I like his movies except for that nervous fellow who's always in them."
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of moments where, like, I haven't seen Sleeper or Sleepers, whatever you said, which sounds like it's more like belly laugh kind of thing, like just slapstick comedy.
It's a much broader movie.
There's a lot of just like sensible chuckles in Annie Hall, you know?
Yes. I think that's a way to do it. I think it's a good way to describe it. It's sensible chuckle, the movie. Yeah, it's nice. It's, it really cements that kind of like, it feels like a very direct, like there's a direct line between Woody Allen's like old stand-up and then this movie. The way, I mean, it literally opens up with him just like talking directly to the audience and like just telling jokes basically. Not his own jokes, but he's like dissecting like historical jokes, like Groucho Marx joke, where it's like, I wouldn't want to be a part of a club that wouldn't have me as a member and that kind of thing, or the "and such small portions" joke, like, very old classic jokes that everyone knows, and like dissecting them and like trying to get to the meaning behind them and that kind of thing. So it's, part comedy, but also part intellectual exercise, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot like every Seinfeld episode, where it's just, we're going to start with the stand-up bit, we're going to go through some stuff that relates to it, and then we're going to wrap it up neatly in a bow at the end. It'll be perfect.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see that. It's not where my mind was, but I like where your mind is at, so that's great. So yeah, that's Annie Hall. I think we can agree. It's a good movie. Let's get to the real meat of this thing, Mike. What'd you think of Jeff Goldblum and Annie Hall? The star.
Oh man, steals the show. No, I don't know. He's in one scene and it's fine.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.
Jeff Goldblum, he forgets his mantra. What a shame.
I forgot my mantra.
What a shame. I can't believe he forgot it. So basically, like when you see Jeff Goldblum in the movie, Alvy and Annie are at Tony Lacey's party. It's like an hour and 15 minutes into the movie, and it's only an hour and a half long. So the entire time I was trying to remember like when the Jeff Goldblum scene is, and it wasn't coming up, and I was like, did I miss it? Or like, did I pick, is this like not the right movie? Did I look at the wrong list? Is Jeff Goldblum not in Annie Hall? And then finally he shows up towards the end, and I was like, oh, thank God. Otherwise I would have like had to explain to you on this podcast why I made you watch a Woody Allen movie without Jeff Goldblum in it. But yeah, so Jeff Goldblum is at Tony Lacey's party. They walk past him, and he's kind of like stuttering for a second. He's on the phone, and then he says,
"Yeah, I forgot my mantra."
And then that's it. Goldblum's there for just the one line. We never see him again. So yeah, I mean, what did you think of the way he delivered that line, his persona in that sequence, Mike? I mean, what did you get out of that 5 seconds?
Oh man, the gravitas he brings to that one line. No, I mean, it's pretty funny. The whole movie, there's this running bit about how his friend is trying to get him, and his agents and all this stuff are trying to get him to move to California. That's where show business is. If you're going to be a comedian, a writer, you got to go there. And he's it's almost like New York is this other character in the movie, which I also kept thinking about the whole time. I never remember the name of that movie.
They came together is what you're.
They came together. So this whole time, and then he goes to California finally, and it's just all the stuff that he's been making fun of. I'm assuming the Goldblum moment is like a jab at like those kind of like 70s lifestyle guru people where you have to have a mantra and all that stuff.
Okay.
So I mean, yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, and that whole scene is pretty goofy. I was watching it with my parents, and they knew that I was watching it for Goldblum or for the podcast, and the whole time they were like, "Where is he? Like in the background of the bar?" Like I didn't know where it was. They didn't know that. Remember, he was in it. So we were kept being like, "Did you see him? Did we miss him? What happened?" And as soon as that party scene started, we were like, "All right, he's got to be in the background somewhere in here, right? Like this movie's almost over." And then when it happened, they were just hysterically laughing that we were going to have to spin a 30 to 45 minute episode out of that one line. And they were just like, "Yeah, good luck."
Pretty
so
much.
That's fun.
Yeah, I mean, and Goldblum, he's talked about it in the past, and he said, something to the effect of like, "Yeah, I went in." And they were like, "Okay, can you say this?" And he said it, and he's like, "All right, thank you, we're good." And that was basically like, he's like, "You don't want me to do anything else?" And it's like, "No, we got the one line." And so Goldblum's like, "Yes." So they used it, so that was great. And like it's in the movie. People say the line to me, like it's a line that Goldblum, like it's a famous Goldblum quote. It's one of those things that like people will say to him on the street, and that kind of thing.
That's crazy.
But it's just that one line in the movie, and then he's gone.
Now we've got me in New York, and my agent says, "Hey, Woody Allen would like to meet you for this movie he's doing." I just went and met him. I had some stupid sort of onesie a kind of workman's polyester khaki kind of uniform on. I don't know why that I took to in those days. And hello, nice to meet you. And he said, that's all I need. I said, really? Did you want me to do anything for you? And no, that's all I need. Okay, thank you. So nice to meet you.
Yeah, she's great looking, great. Little tad on the androgynous side, but
Mr.
dynamic.
Davis. Yeah, I forgot my mantra.
And that was it. Of course, they just used the line, but people seem to have remembered that line. You know.
Supposedly, I mean, there's that one episode of Seinfeld, weirdly, that we're bringing that up again. But the Seinfeld bit from, I think, season 4 of the show, where Kramer gets cast in a Woody Allen movie, he's given the line, "These pretzels are making me thirsty." And that's like a whole bit in the show. It's a whole plot line about how he's going to deliver that line. That whole plot in the show was inspired by Goldblum's part in this movie. The fact that Jeff Goldblum pops in for one line and then leaves. That was Kramer. Like, that entire thing with Kramer was based on this.
That's amazing.
That
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, I think Goldblum is very good in the 3 seconds that he's on screen or whatever. I think he makes more of an impression here actually than he does in, say, California Split, where he has a few seconds more screen time in that movie, but I couldn't tell you anything that he says in California Split.
Yeah.
This one he only has one line, but he makes it count. He really sells the fact. This is a man who has forgotten his mantra, and he makes you believe it.
I forgot my mantra.
He really comes to life. His character is really well-rounded on the screen. I believe that he has forgotten his mantra.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'll see if this even applies, but how do you think this role fits into the roles that we've seen Jeff Goldblum play so far, Mike?
I mean, I'm going to choose to believe that he is playing the character that he was in Next Stop Greenwich Village, who has been cast in this Woody Allen movie, and he's using his 3 years at the workshop or whatever, his whole thing that his whole backstory he goes through in Next Stop Greenwich Village.
Of course, although his character in Next Stop Greenwich Village was in the 50s, and this is the 70s.
Look, okay, you don't know.
So he's a time traveling actor. Okay, we established this.
Who specializes in bit parts.
Exactly. It's weird. Actually, that was the one that I drew a comparison to as well. And I think partially because that's the only movie we've seen where he got to have a decently supporting part so far. Like, you know, there is Nashville, which we've talked about, but he has no lines in that movie. But Next Up Greenwich Village is the one where he has, like, 2 real scenes of, like, conversations and dialogue and stuff. And he's, a kind of major supporting character. He's not part of, like, the main crew of the movie, but he's there and he gets a couple of scenes. But I feel like even in this just one line, like, he captured some of the same energy that he had in Next Up Greenwich Village. A little bit. Like, as much as is humanly possible to capture in 5 words. Is it 5 words? I think I forgot my mind. It's 4 words. He captured.
That's how good it is. You thought it was one whole word more.
He sold beyond an extra word. I think he throws in a couple of, like, ums and ahs, like, kind of before that too. There's a little bit of Goldblum popping out, even again in that just brief 3 to 4 seconds that he's on screen. And then he is gone. So I believe that's about all we can talk about with Goldblum, unless you have more, Mike.
I did think of Nashville just structurally, like the way the movies are put together. It kind of felt sort of similar in that it's just kind of this floaty, we move in and out. I mean, Nashville, it's a little, I hate to say Nashville, somehow more structured, but like we follow singular characters between scenes in Nashville, and this is just... We follow ideas, basically, where, like, Woody Allen will make a joke and then, we have a flashback to him and they're all at his parents' parties and stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
So it felt kind of similar in that to me, where it was just like, we kind of float around, we're going through little vignettes in these characters' lives, less of a overarching plot sort of thing.
Yeah, this is a very stream of consciousness movie. And it tells you right at the beginning of the movie, it tells you he and Annie broke up, right? Like that's... At the beginning of the movie, one of the first lines he has is like, me and Annie broke up and that kind of thing. And so it plays around with time. You're sort of experiencing the beginning, middle, and end of the relationship kind of all at once throughout the movie. And also flashing back into the both characters' past and stuff. And I like it. Feels very... It's weird to say avant-garde because I don't think it really qualifies as avant-garde. But, for American cinema, maybe it does. It plays around and does things a lot differently than like a traditional narrative film, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the real backbone of that idea is the the media critique scene or whatever you want to call it when they're online at
Sure.
the movie theater, and the guy's critiquing Fellini for being more style than on substance, and he's more interested in what technically he can do. And then Annie Hall does that the whole movie with the split screens and the flashbacks and all that stuff. And I thought that was a fun little wink, wink, nudge, nudge moment.
Yeah, speaking of that, and I guess we're getting into the moments or scenes that stood out to us at this point. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and I think partially because I really hate how much like Alvy I am in that situation when when it comes to it starts off with they show up at the movie like 2 minutes late, and he's like, we can't go in. I can't go in the middle. and he's like the trailers are still on. It's like, no, I can't do it. And it's like, oh God, no, that's me.
I wrote a note down that it's Mike, that it's you.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
When Annie Hall's like, it's only the titles. They're in Swedish. Who cares? He's like, no, I can't go in. We can't do it.
Right. But then so later they're online again, and the guy behind them is talking about Fellini, and what do you like? Alvy like right in front of him is just like listening in and being like, oh God, this guy's opinions are the worst. I hate them. And he's like, reading into it's like he's probably on the first date with this girl. She doesn't give a shit and like all that stuff. And like, that's exactly what I do.
It's film Twitter.
It's film Twitter, basically. It really perfectly captured the feeling of like going into an internet comments section and being like, everyone here is wrong. I don't understand.
We saw the Fellini film last Tuesday. It is not one of his best. It lacks a cohesive structure. You get the feeling that he's not absolutely sure what it is he wants to say. Of course, I've always felt he was essentially a technical filmmaker. Granted, La Strada was a great film. Great in its use of negative imagery more than anything else. But that central cohesive core, that must lead through an artist's work, leading from one to the other.
Screaming his opinions in my ear.
You understand what I'm talking about? Like all that Juliet of the Spirits or Satyricon. I found it incredibly indulgent. He really is. He's one of the most indulgent filmmakers. He really is.
Keyword here
and
is indulgent.
Without getting... let's put it this way.
What are you depressed about?
I
miss my therapy. I overslept.
How can you possibly oversleep?
The alarm clock.
Do you know the hostile gesture that is to me?
I know, because of our sexual problem, right?
Everybody online at the New Yorker has to know our rate of intercourse.
It's like Samuel Beckett. I admire the technique, but it doesn't hit me on a gut level.
I'd like to hit this guy on a gut level.
Stop it, Alvy.
He's spitting on my neck. He spits on my neck when he
important thing of
talks.
all.
And you know something else? You're so egocentric that if I miss my therapy, you can only think of it in terms of how it affects you.
It's Weltanschauung is what it is.
Probably on their first date, right? Probably met by answering an ad in the New York Review of Books. 30-ish academic wishes to meet woman who's interested in Mozart, James Joyce, and sodomy.
But yeah, and that has the famous bit where he like pulls out Marshall McLuhan, and Marshall McLuhan says to the guy like, "You know nothing of my work," and that kind of thing, which is parodied a lot. Actually, I first saw that bit on a Family Guy episode once.
What?
Like Family Guy just like directly recreated the bit or something like that, where like somebody pulls out Jesus and Jesus is like, "You know nothing of my work," and that kind of thing. And that's honestly I watched a lot of Family Guy when I was in like junior high and high school because I was in junior high and high school when Family Guy was on.
Yep.
That's basically how it works.
Yes.
And I was introduced to a lot of pop culture through Family Guy and The Simpsons also, which was my favorite show. But Family Guy like specifically just had a lot of stuff where we just reference pop culture without any kind of context. And so I would see something on Family Guy and then like read up about it later and then like catch up with it like a year or two after I saw it and be like, oh, it's like that episode of Family Guy where they did the thing.
Oh man.
My point is Family Guy poisoned pop culture for an entire generation of people. But
correct. 100%. Family Guy's bad, like as a force, not like it quality wise, just as an entity.
Yeah, first few seasons are pretty good. I feel it. Whenever I stopped watching Family Guy is when it got bad. It's basically my.
You, the final arbiter in what declares pop culture. Your opinions matter, Mike.
Right, the arbiter. That's what they should call me.
Yes.
But anyway, so outside of that, Mike, what are the moments or scenes that to you in Annie Hall?
It's kind of hard to pin down because there's a lot of stuff that, like you said, it's stream of consciousness where it's kind of like I forget exactly when or why this is happening. The lobster scene is cute. When they're trying to boil some lobsters and they get on the floor and like Alvy's terrified and Annie's just hysterically laughing at him.
Yeah.
And then when it comes back later at the end with another girl and she's just like, wait, I thought you quit smoking? I don't understand your joke. And it's just like completely ruined. It was so sad at the second time, but very adorable in the first one.
Yeah, no, that's I think one of the more famous sequences in the movie too, is the lobster sequences. And yeah, it's a good way to show the difference between, you know, how he and Annie get along versus how he and this next girl get along. Like the second time it happens, that's like when he realizes he has to get Annie back, kind of thing. Towards the end of the movie, where he has to like go back and try to get her back and that kind of thing. But again, it like does mess around with the timeline a lot. And like for these previous episodes, like recently, I feel like we've been doing like a pretty like straightforward like beginning of the movie through to the end of the movie, as far as like kind of just recapping the thing, which I think is a nice structure to have for the podcast. I don't think we're gonna be able to do that for this episode. You know, not to toot my own podcast horn, but we have a pretty good podcast going here, Mike.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
But yeah, so I mean, and this one's a lot more just like all over the place in terms of like when things happen. So you know, just throw out scenes as they come to you, like whatever you got.
I mean, the first scene that made me a little uncomfortable, unfortunately, is also like the first scene in the movie.
Yep.
When he's in the kindergarten class.
Yeah, I had that down too. It's really weird.
When he's as a little kid, he like just gets up and kisses this girl, and the teacher's like, "This is the 6th time this month," or whatever. Right. It's like. Maybe don't do that. I mean, that's bad. And then he as an adult is in the class and they're talking about, well, I didn't have, I forget exactly what the term is, but like he was interested in girls at 6 years old or whatever.
That whole scene it's very odd because you get adult Woody Allen sitting in a classroom full of like 8-year-olds, and he's talking about his sexual preferences and he's talking to like, you know, all about these like, you know, things like relationships and stuff like that. And it's all very adult and it's meant for comedy. And, you know, back in 1977, it would have been funny because we didn't know about Woody Allen's personal life back then.
Yeah.
Now we do, and it's much weirder. So it's one of those things that, you know, would have been fine then, I guess. But and again, I think structurally, like the sequence is funny. It is good jokes.
Yeah.
There's good jokes in there. I like in theory, but like because it's Woody Allen in that scene, it feels uncomfortable now.
Yep, 100%.
But yeah, what do you think of Diane Keaton in the movie, Mike, as Annie Hall? You know, the titular character, won Best Actress that year. What'd you think of her?
I mean, incredible, great. The Criterion has this as part of their 70s style icon collections, and 100% like incredible. Every time she's on screen, she looks amazing with all of her outfits and stuff. And the wearing menswear thing was transgressive in 1977.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and she's amazing as Annie Hall. I think. The relationship between her and Alvy is believable and engaging, and I love the way they are codependent and are terrible for each other, but still in love and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, Diane Keaton, I mean, Best Actress makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, she is really great, and I think the highlight of the movie in terms of actors. But and her catchphrase "la di da." Also an iconic line, made AFI's list of the 100 best movie quotes. If you look at like the AFI lists that have been made. Like Annie Hall is like on almost all of them. it's just everywhere. It's you know constant. But and Lottie Da's on there. Diane Keaton sings 2 songs in the film. It Had to Be You and Seems Like Old Times, both of which are very good. Like she's really great. I think one of them also on the AFI list of best movie songs.
Classic.
So there's that.
It's another Nashville connection.
What? Oh yeah, there's songs.
There are songs.
There are songs in both movies. I was like, Diane Keaton wasn't in Nashville. What are you talking about?
No. But the main character, quote unquote, for Nashville, they sing in both movies.
True. Yeah, very much. Yeah. And then the sequence where they meet, like the sequence where they meet for the first time at the tennis club. You know, they kind of hit it off and all that stuff, and they're like a little bit awkward, a little bit flirty. There's the subtitles scene where they're like, you know, talking to each other and like. You know, they're both having a conversation. I don't even remember what they're talking about. The subtitles show what they're really thinking. And she's like, oh, man, he thinks I'm pretentious or he thinks I'm not smart or whatever. And he's like, man, I really want to see her naked and that kind of thing. You know, some funny stuff. That's also, you know, you can point to like 10 different scenes in this movie and be like, oh, yeah, that's a really well-known, like iconic scene that has been like referenced in other pop culture. And that is one of those scenes.
Yeah, I really like that scene. I got nervous for a second because I was having some issues with the Criterion Channel Roku app that I was watching it through, where like the audio would desync and like you'd have to like go back and hit resume play and it would fix and all this weird stuff. So like all of a sudden subtitles popped up and I was like, oh fucking god damn it! And then I realized what was going on. And I was like, oh okay, all right. This is
pretty good. And yeah, and their whole relationship, again, the movie is built around their relationship. Apparently Woody Allen really didn't consider this a romance movie. He considered it more of like, you know, again, autobiographical, kind of love letter to New York City, that kind of thing. And like the fact that, you know, he was dating Annie Hall was like, you know, not necessarily the A plot of the movie to him. I don't know what he's doing misreading his own films here, but like
yeah, come on. Good thing, death of the author. His intent doesn't matter, Mike.
Very strange, but the movie is a love letter to New York City. Even and that kind of would continue for several of his movies. Obviously he made a movie called Manhattan. But this movie, it's about him being in New York, and there's I really like when he goes from New York to LA and it plays up the differences between the two cities. And I think one of the more subtle things that New York theaters are playing, the movie theaters they go to in New York are playing highbrow fare like Ingmar Bergman or Fellini films, and then he goes to LA and you pass a movie theater and it's playing Messiah of Evil.
Yeah, which we saw, didn't we, at Hudson Horror Show?
We saw that at a that wasn't a Hudson Horror Show. That was Dismember at the Alamo.
Oh right, the classier of the two.
Exactly, yeah. And I forget what the other it was a double feature of two B horror movies or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where he's trying to paint New York as this intellectual mecca, and LA as this sleazy trash pile.
Right. Yeah, they're playing that 4-hour Holocaust documentary at the I forget what it was, The Sorrow and the something.
The Sorrow and the Pity.
Sorrow and the Pity, yeah, which they're constantly going to. Yeah, of course.
They've seen it many times.
Yep.
But yeah, so that was just stuff like that where differentiates between New York and LA and how much he loves New York, and that played into a lot of his movies, and a lot of his movies are about locations also. There was a period of time throughout the 2000s, 2010s where Woody Allen would put out a movie a year, and it would always be a movie in a different location. And it seemed like he was making a movie just to go on vacation or something like that.
the Sandler strategy.
The Sandler strategy, of course. Yeah, Woody Allen and Adam Sandler, they make movies for the same reason, basically. Just hang out with their friends, go on vacation. I don't want to read into that at all. Adam Sandler, I enjoy Adam Sandler's work a lot. They're both Jewish also, so there's that. But there was Midnight in Paris, and then there was I think his next movie was To Rome with Love.
Yeah.
And then I think Blue Jasmine was after that, which is just Blue Jasmine. But then I think there was there was others that took place in Spain, and other ones that took place elsewhere. They're all over the place. He was kind of just country hopping for a while. But yeah, and you mentioned before, there's a lot of fourth wall breaking in this movie, and bits where Alfie is talking to random people on the streets, and they know, and they'll always know everything about his situation and know all the advice they want to tell him and that kind of thing. It's just weird structural things that a normal movie wouldn't do, but this movie does, and it mostly works for it.
Yeah. There's one scene kind of towards the end of the relationship when they're having Annie Hall and Alvy are having an argument, and she gets in a cab and drives away, and he's like, I just don't understand, and the old woman walking by is like, well, it's because you did this, and explains it, and then he stops this very pretty looking couple, and he's like, how do you two make it work? And she's like, well, I have no original thoughts and I have nothing to offer, and then yeah, me too. And then he stops the mounted police and talks to the horse, and that one was good.
Yeah, solid stuff. What was your favorite scene in the movie, Mike? Because I have a favorite scene. I have one scene that I specifically really, really like one joke that really lands for me, and I'm curious if it's the same one for you.
I don't know. There's the whole there's the scene with when they go back to Wisconsin to visit Annie Hall's family, and they're having dinner, and that whole sequence is very funny, where it splits screens between Alvy's family, and they're arguing and yelling, and somebody's got diabetes and all this stuff, and then Christopher Walken, who plays her brother, Annie's brother, it says you ever, as an artist, you may relate to this, and you ever have this feeling when you're driving at night and you see the two headlights coming on and you just want to swerve into them, and I forget what he says, I have a meeting back on planet Earth or something. That line was really good.
Alvy. Hi, Dwayne. How's it going?
This is my room.
Oh, yeah? It's terrific.
Can I confess something? I tell you this because, as an artist, I think you'll understand. Sometimes when I'm driving on the road at night, I see two headlights coming toward me. Fast, I have this sudden impulse to turn the wheel quickly, head on into the oncoming car. I can anticipate the explosion, the sound of shattering glass, the flames rising out of the flowing gasoline.
Right. Well, I have to I have to go now, Dwayne, because I'm due back on the planet Earth.
Right, and that is the scene I was talking about. Christopher Walken has a monologue about he has the urge to crash his car when he's driving at night. And then, Woody Allen kind of excuses himself in the conversation, and then the guy who's driving him to the airport is Christopher Walken. Which was pretty great. So yeah, I mean I remember that being my favorite scene when I watched it the first time, and I think that's still just really, really great. I mean, I think it's helped that Christopher Walken is really good at playing creepy people. And he does it very well here.
Yeah, and then the slow pan, the reveal that Christopher Walken's driving, and the slow pan over to Alfie, and he's just like, you can see the pure terror on his face.
It's really good. Other big laughs in the movie. I really like this one exchange they have where she is talking about moving in with Alvy, and Alvy's like, oh, but you have your own apartment. You should have your own apartment and that kind of thing. And she's like, but my place is terrible. It's got bugs and the plumbing's out. And it's like, yeah, but it's a great apartment. It's in New York City. It's all that stuff. And she's like, that place is $400. And he's like, that place is $400? But it's got bugs and the plumbing's out. That was a big laugh for me. Other kind of comedy bits throughout the movie sprinkled throughout, Mike, that you wanted to highlight?
I think the ongoing bit about how Alvy has a driver's license but doesn't drive, and all the Wisconsin people drive like crazy, and they're like, Annie's trying to go through like the center console looking for gum, and she's swerving around and all that stuff, and then it pays off at the end when Alvy has to drive into LA and he doesn't know how to drive, and he hits every car in the parking lot on the way, like when he's trying to pull out.
Yeah, and it's cutting back and forth. It's cutting back and forth between that and his childhood, where his dad ran the bumper car arena.
Right.
It's just this weird, like, kind of, again, sort of avant-garde type thing that they're doing there. But yeah, that's really good. I like the part where he sneezes in cocaine. That's pretty funny. That's good. I think the spider stuff is very funny, where he's just like freaking out over the size of the spider that's in the tub. He's like grabbing a gigantic broom, and he's like, "There's a spider in here the size of a Buick," and he's running inside. Yeah. It's great. That's all really good. The Snow White animated bit also is really like just that comes out of left field. That's really weird.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so did I. Like, it's one of those things, like, that seems like such a distinctive part of the movie. It's the only part of the movie that's animated. So you would think like that's something that would just be in your mind. But I guess because it's like just one extra bit in a movie that's full of just extra bits, you kind of forget about it after a while. But yeah, that's a pretty good sequence where he's describing how, he didn't like Snow White when he was a kid. He was attracted to the witch and that kind of thing. And then it's just, showing him living with the witch, and she's just like, nagging him the entire time. Pretty good stuff. What do you think of the scene with Shelley Duvall as the Rolling Stone reporter?
That was pretty funny. I thought that was another like media skewering moment where she's just kind of really vapid and talking about the transplendent or whatever word she creates. Right. And he just has no interest. And then he goes to Annie Hall's apartment, or gets with the spider bit. I think it's the spiders. And sees that she was at a rock concert now, and he's like, "Wait, when did you get into rock music?" And even though he was just at a rock concert, which I thought was pretty funny. It was pretty good. It was cool to see Shelley Duvall in this too.
Yeah, really enjoyed seeing her, and she was also in 3 Women, directed by Robert Altman. So 2 movies, same day, wild.
Wow, crazy.
And so after that, I mean, at that point, that's around the time you start to see, that's when Paul Simon kind of shows up at the bar, and he has seen Annie Hall sing, and he's like really interested in her as like bringing her out to LA to record something. And as soon as that happens, like Woody Allen, Alvy is just immediately like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like this, like he's like, he invites him to a party, and like, oh, we have a thing. So it's clear he's like resistant to the idea of like just going to LA and hanging out with those people, which he has been the entire movie. But then they finally go to LA. They're at Paul Simon's party, and that's where you see Jeff Goldblum once again. Remember, this is a Jeff Goldblum podcast. Just throwing it out there.
Technically, he's in this movie.
Yes, Jeff Goldblum forgets his mantra.
I forgot my mantra.
Alvy's best friend is there. He has moved out to LA. He's working on a TV show. And then after the party, that's when they kind of realize, like on the flight back home, they realize they got to break up. So mutual decision. He has that quote about our relationship is like a shark. You got to swim, keep swimming or whatever, or else it dies. That kind of thing. That's I'm workshopping my Woody Allen impression.
It's real relevant. Good job. Yeah. Perfect timing.
That's what the people want to hear in 2020.
You're gonna get a lot of use out of that.
But they break up on the plane, and then the next scene is them in the apartment, kind of like taking her stuff out. Or taking unpacking his stuff, and I like the detail that Alvy just has a box of buttons to impeach various presidents.
Yes,
He's like picks it up, like impeach Nixon, impeach Carter, Impeach Ford. Like, it was just constant. That's pretty great.
Yeah, I like the whole kind of like leftist socialist thing that is going on throughout this movie with Alvia. Yeah. He's like, well, I'm a bigot, but for the left, and like that whole thing, which is pretty funny. And there was one bit I just remembered too that I really liked. When he's in California and he's like, he gets dizzy and he's nauseous and he's not gonna be able to make it to the award ceremony he's supposed to present at or something like that, and the doctor's like, just try to eat this plain chicken, like just see if you can stomach it. And then Annie's in the background on the phone and she's like, oh, that was the ceremony, like that was the awards people, you don't have to do it anymore. And he starts like, oh man, I'm not even gonna be able to do this, and he starts eating the chicken. And he's like, oh, can you pass me the salt? And like that whole thing where he's just like, now he's really hungry. It was very, very funny.
Yeah, there it is. And he also has like a line, like something about an award show in LA, and he's like, all they do in LA is give out awards, like that kind of thing. Which is actually pretty funny if you know like Woody Allen's like backstory. Like he does not, I don't think he ever attended the Oscars. Like he's been nominated a bunch of times and he never attended because he always had he just didn't like the fact that they gave out awards for art, basically.
Right.
And I actually didn't look into it. I'm not sure if he was actually even there when Annie Hall won Best Picture. He might have been. That might have been like pre-hatred of awards. Maybe once he won awards, that was it for him. He was like, all right,
now that I've made it to the top, there's nothing else for me.
But yeah, so that whole sequence, they break up on the airplane, and then that's the kind of point where you see the second lobster scene, and Albie starts to regret the breakup. And I think it does a pretty good job of like capturing that emotion of breaking up with somebody and then realizing, wait, that was a mistake, and like trying to figure out how to take that back. And so he is calling her, and she's like, don't come over, and he flies to LA and meets her anyway. They meet, but it's clearly over. And then that's the sequence where he's crashing the car in the outside of the restaurant, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
And then then he comes back to New York. He writes a play on the experience. You see like two actors recreating the exact same scene you just watched 5 minutes ago between between them. Although it ends differently, it ends with them getting back together. And he's like, "What do you want? That's my first play. What do you want?" And then that's pretty much like the wrap up of the movie. He runs into Annie one more time in New York. They part ways. Sigourney Weaver is there. You can see her if you have like a microscope. And it kind of ends the same way the movie began, where he's talking about like an old joke and like kind of analyzing that again, where he's like, why do we have the chickens? I need the eggs. That's not the exact joke, but
no, you got it.
That's word for word what it is. But if you've seen the movie, you likely know what I'm talking about. And then that's pretty much the end of the movie. So that whole sequence of events, Mike, the breakup and the meeting again, and the pontificating at the end. What did you think of the whole end of the film?
I felt it was a neat little bow, a nice way to that moment of regret of wait, like you said, this is a mistake, I shouldn't be breaking up with this person, and then realizing that like they've moved on and you have to just be mature about it, and sometimes people come in and out of your lives and that's the way it is. And that whole moment at the end with the joke that just kind of like sometimes we just keep needing the eggs or whatever it was, like you said. It was pretty nice little touch at the end there.
Yeah, it's very nice. So that's basically Annie Hall. That's as straightforward as we could have made that discussion, I feel like, as far as trying to pin down the plot points of the movie. Any other like kind of just scenes that you wanted to highlight there? Do you want to start like a Joey Nichols fan club at any point, Mike?
I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean that whole device that the movie uses, where it'll put like the modern day people in a flashback and have them commenting on the scene as it's going on. When he's talking about his mom and his aunt, and she was the sister with the personality, and then they're like, oh well, what was that personality? And like she's responding, but not really to them, but to the that whole thing was all fun. I liked all that.
Yeah, all good stuff. I also really liked the sequence where they go back and see through Annie's ex-boyfriends, and they meet Jerry, the very pretentious actor who's trying to tell her about whatever, like just being like the pretentious guy at a party, just like talking her ear off kind of thing, and that kind of thing.
Touch my heart, with your foot. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's Annie Hall. It's as far as this goes, again, generally considered American classic. It's one of those things that it's so deeply ingrained into the culture. There's no real escaping it, even if you're like fully against Woody Allen, don't want to ever watch one of his movies. You don't have to watch Annie Hall, but you're gonna have to acknowledge that it influenced a lot of other things, basically. Like every kind of romance, introspective drama from 40 years onward has been influenced by Annie Hall and Woody Allen in some way. And even filmmakers that I love today, like Noah Baumbach, I feel like is very similar to Woody Allen in terms of like just the way he writes. And it's one of those things where it's like, hey, you kind of gotta roll with that. Like, that's, if Annie Hall didn't exist, a lot of the stuff that we do like now wouldn't exist also. But yeah, so that's Annie Hall. I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I think it's a pretty good movie. It's, still very good. But I wouldn't say like, hey, go dive deep into the films of Woody Allen now. Become like a diehard Allen head. Not saying that at all.
Definitely don't do that, actually.
Actively do not do that.
Correct, yeah.
If you have interest in some of his older movies, like the established classics or whatever, go for it. But, you don't have to like be somebody who is really into the films of Woody Allen and defends him on Twitter or something like that.
Right.
But let's move on now to some Letterboxd reviews, Mike, for Annie Hall. Let's see what the people have to say about this movie. And as you can imagine, it's a little bit divisive in the world.
Sure.
Here's a 2.5-star review from Brendan Michaels, which is actually a transcript from an Orson Welles interview. Orson Welles, I hate Woody Allen physically. I dislike that kind of man. Orson Welles did not like Woody Allen as a filmmaker. Henry Jaglin, the guy interviewing him, I've never understood why. Have you met him? Orson, oh yes, I can hardly bear to talk to him. He has the Chaplin disease. That particular combination of arrogance and timidity sets my teeth on edge.
Jesus.
Guy interviewing, he's not arrogant, he's shy. Orson, he is arrogant. Like all people with timid personalities, his arrogance is unlimited. Anybody who speaks quietly and shrivels up in company is unbelievably arrogant. He acts shy, but he's not. He's scared, he hates himself, and he loves himself. A very tense situation. It's people like me who have to carry on and pretend to be modest. To me, it's the most embarrassing thing in the world. A man who presents himself at his worst to get laughs in order to free himself from his hang-ups. Everything he does on the screen is therapeutic. So,
wow.
Yeah, Orson Welles, very strong feelings about Woody Allen and his place in the filmmaking world.
His tweets would have been so fire. If
oh,
he was still
man.
around.
Would have been insane. Here's a review from Ava Davis, who did not give any stars. She just said, it's just Woody Allen bitching about his sex life for the duration of a feature-length film.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely that also.
Yeah, which is also what it is. Here's a 5-star review from Arda Kanak, which reads, Annie Hall differs from the zany movies Woody shot before 1977 by bringing a whole new and pure dimension to the standard romantic comedies. Diane Keaton has recreated the image of a woman to fall in love with her astonishing performance and style. In this film, Keaton shows her clothes herself, and after the screening, a new trend was included in the 70s fashion, Annie Hall style. Although Woody has always denied this, it's clear that the film bears traces of the Allen-Keaton relationship. Diane Keaton was born Diane Hall. And her close friends call her Annie.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Keaton sings 2 songs in this film. It Had to Be You and Seems Like Old Times. Especially while singing Seems Like Old Times, it is impossible not to admire Keaton. So yeah, Diane Keaton, again, great in the movie. She is awesome.
Yeah.
Probably deserved the Best Actress category. I don't know who she was up against, but she was really good. Here's a review from Carrie, which is 3 stars, which reads, how is it possible that someone as insufferable as Woody Allen's character had multiple long-term relationships? Also a fair point. And finally, here's a 4-star review from Persia. I don't know how to feel about this one. I feel almost ashamed to admit how much I loved it. The direction and screenplay in some parts are absolutely immaculate. But at the same time, it's impossible to separate art from the artist when the artist is so undeniably entrenched in the art. It's clearly pretentious and Allen is just jerking himself off the whole time. Equally, though, Diane Keaton is an absolute vision and a god amongst us plebeians who wholly makes the film so enjoyable. I do feel bad giving such a high score to a movie by a rapist, but I did illegally stream the movie, so balancing the cosmic scales.
I'm doing my part.
Yeah, I'm doing my part. That's very Starship Troopers, like looking into the camera. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's. I think that about wraps it up. I think that's the note to end on for this one. So that's Annie Hall. Jeff Goldblum is in the movie.
Yes. Did we mention that? I think we mentioned that. He's actually in the movie.
Yes, he is 100% in the movie. For about 3 seconds. He forgot his mantra, right. Mike. He forgot his mantra.
I forgot my mantra.
Poor guy.
It's a real shame. But in any case, Jeff Goldblum will hopefully not forget his mantra in the next movie, which I think he'll have a more substantial role in. We'll talk about that in a minute. But until then, where can we find you online this week, Mike?
You can find me at MD Film Blog on Twitter and Letterboxd.
And you can find me at M Smith Film blog on Twitter, Mike Smith Film on Letterboxd, Radio Mike Sandwich on Instagram. Thanks for listening to The Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith. That's Mike DeCriscio. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast app. Hit us up at jeffgoldblumcompleteworks@gmail.com. And you can find the rest of our podcast on Rapture Press alongside the Review Zoo, a podcast about comic books and movie news and all that nerdy stuff. And you can follow this podcast on Twitter at GoldblumPod and our other podcast at Mike and Mike Pod, also on Twitter. Our theme song, created by Kyle Cullen, who you can reach for your own podcast themes at kylespodcastthemes@gmail.com. And our logo was designed by Jacob Honeycutt, or at Jacob Honey on Twitter. So on the next episode of Complete Works, Goldblum has one more movie coming out in 1977, and it looks like this one is the one where he finally gets a real substantial role. I hope. That's like I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. He is third on the cast list, Mike. So fingers crossed.
All right.
It's called Between the Lines, which I've never heard of. And if you want to watch it ahead of the podcast, it is available for free right now on YouTube. It's up there. It's up there right now. So probably worth checking it out there, because I don't believe it's available to stream anywhere else.
Can't wait.
And otherwise will be very difficult to find. And we're putting out bonus episodes of Mike and Mike Go to the Movies while the quarantine's going on, so you can check those out too. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and remember to go for the Goldblum.
His girlfriend's beautiful.
Yeah, she's great looking. Great. Little tad on the androgynous side, but
Mr.
dynamite.
Davis. Yeah, I forgot my mantra.